Welcome to Industry Insights with Route Consultant, your front row seat to the fast-moving world of logistics and beyond. Each week, we bring you game-changing insights, real-world strategies, and fresh perspectives to fuel smarter investments and build stronger businesses. Join us as we sit down with expert guests to explore emerging trends and pressing topics across a wide range of industries. This is Industry Insights.
We have Steve Crawford here in Houston. It is a pleasure to have you, Steve.
It's great to be here.
Yeah, to talk through your story and learn all about it. So,
what do you want to know?
well, let's start at the beginning. So, I know you've been in trucking for a long time, but how did it ever come up? Was this something that was in your family? How'd you find it?
Yep. My dad was in the trucking business, and actually, Dad was a inaugural member of the Teamsters Union in 1935.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And spent 22 years as a driver, then went into management, had the chance to get his own company. And in doing so, I grew up in northern South Dakota. He was back and forth between South Dakota and Minnesota. So I basically grew up in Aberdeen, South Dakota. And much of my childhood was riding in a truck with my dad and learning about the industry. And I actually drove a truck before I drove a car. It's just,
on the highway?
Sure. But I mean, keep in mind, in western South Dakota, there's more cows than there are people. So.
Yeah. That's the first thing I ever drove was a tractor, so
right,
so it's similar.
Right.
But
yeah, and when you grow up in an agricultural area, that has a big influence on you.
Yeah.
And there's probably more that we can talk about that later. But the either you're farmers, somebody in your family is farmers, or your friends are farmers, so you kind of have that mindset of get her done type thing.
Yeah.
And so that's the way that I grew up. And then going through high school, my dad's health started to fail. So by the time I was a senior, I was a little bit ahead of credits. And so I was getting out of school at noon to go to work.
Oh, wow.
And then when I graduated, I like to tell people college was the best semester of my life because I was going to a school where you could be a teacher, and Dad's health progressively was getting worse. And I did spend 18 months playing in a rock band.
Oh, wow.
Had that in my background.
Well, let's just pivot to that. So have you played anything since then, or was that the best 18 months of your life?
I can't remember.
Yeah, sounds about right. Yeah.
It was fun to do that because music is a big deal to me.
Okay.
But the school that I was going to was a teacher's college, and at that time you could make $5,000 a year teaching school. You could make $10,000 a year driving trucks. So you don't have to be real smart to figure out that that's a good move. And no, on the music thing though, I still play some, and I just do some like solo type things or whatnot. Just more for enjoyment than anything. But my hobby is going to concerts. I've got a lot of them. I'm probably one of the few people that can say this. I saw Janis Joplin in concert.
Wow.
I'm pretty old.
Yeah, that's awesome though. Yeah.
But music has been such a big part of my life, and but with the things I learned with my dad were some of the core things that you not only measure trucking with, but probably measure your life with. But you got to be careful to not go too far with it. For example, we hear a lot about efficiency.
Yeah.
And that's great, but then it's like when I'm mowing the lawn, can I get done in 20 minutes? Well, what happens if it takes 22 minutes? It's not the end of the world. So you got to be careful not to apply everything to your life.
Yeah.
But you can honestly say I grew up in the industry.
Okay. And was he driving for FedEx, or was he like external, or he owned his own company?
FedEx did not exist back in those days.
Yeah.
The company that he drove for was an LTL company out of Minneapolis, and they got merged into somebody else. And then so he started in the LTL business, and it was highly regulated by the Interstate Commerce Commission. So you had designated authorities, and you could only work in certain areas. And so Dad, I was probably about 26 at the time, had the opportunity to sell the business, and the writing was on the wall, so to speak, that the small company in a small rural area, it's not going to be viable.
Yeah.
And he was at an age where he could cash in, that was going to be his retirement. And so I went to work for the guy that bought him, and I ended up moving from Aberdeen to Sioux Falls, spent 9 years there, and and with success comes a certain amount of failure. I had to go through bankruptcy in 1988 because I made some dumb decisions.
Yeah.
Don't we all?
Yeah.
And so we moved from Sioux Falls to St. Louis, and I got a job with Roberts Express, which is now FedEx Custom Critical. and I was a recruiter for them.
Okay.
And again, I saw the people that I was recruiting becoming financially wealthy, and I don't have a college degree, so I couldn't even get advancement. I proudly tell people I have a PhD, public high diploma. And so I saw these people becoming very successful as contractors, and so I resigned and said, I want to be a contractor. I don't want to be a corporate employee anymore. And I did that. I started my business on my own ownership in 1991.
Okay.
And then Roadway owned RPS. And they owned Roberts Express too. And so I went over to RPS in 95, and of course that became FedEx in 99 or 2000 or something like that. So this June will be 30 years that I've been in this segment of it, but really in my entire life is something to do with transportation.
Your contractor ID must be an early one.
Yeah, it's pretty low.
Yeah, that's awesome. Those are rare to see these days. There's not as many of the old guard that have still maintained and been successful to this day. I mean, there's been so much change in the last 30 years. So.
Well, and a lot of I know of two people that have numbers lower than mine. One is actually the son who's about my age is running the business, but his dad, actually his number is lower. His dad had started the business up in the Chicago area. And then a fellow that I just bought out back in November, he had a badge number.
You were trying to eliminate the lower badge numbers, I understand.
Yeah, get them out of my way.
Yeah, be on top. That's fantastic. But Steve, what is it that keeps you going in trucking after 50 plus years?
Well, after 50 years, why do I keep going? It's really the motivation of, when you call it success, accomplishment. Even back in the day when I was driving, when I unhooked from my trailers, I have accomplished what I was supposed to do that day. So you can get satisfaction from this business, even you're just giving your own feedback, but it's satisfying to know that you accomplished today what you were supposed to do.
If you think back on those really early days of RPS to FedEx, what was life like? Were you just running the one run, just purely owner operator at that point in time, or did you have additional runs?
I just had one truck, and in those days where we had line haul and P&D included the trailer spot, so I started actually as a P&D contractor with a tractor. I never had the small vans, and just started with one, and then slowly this, that, and the other thing. And my manager at the time, and this is back in the days when you could really have good, solid conversations and didn't have legal in the way and all that. And we just talked about what does the future look like, and it was going to be a good move for me to move over to line haul. And then so by 1999 I had 3 trucks, and then by 2006 maybe it was 7, I think, I remember in 2006 we went from 6 to 7 trucks. And then fortunately during that time the way FedEx worked, I was RPS of course at the time, but they were taking a lot of market share away from UPS. And so as the business grew, we had to go through a lot of changes, if you want to call it. I don't know that it was intentional that RPS and then FedEx said we have to change certain things, but the market kind of dictated it. And if I can just go through it real quick. First of all, when RPS started, our competitive edge was price, because there was UPS and there was a post office, and that was it. So Roadway at the time was probably the only company that could take on UPS. And so, but that was based on price. And then service became important. And because I remember in 1999, the goal was to have 99% service. And then it went from that to being, we'll call it market share, the network, whatever. So it really, service was still important, but you really were, how big, not how big we can get. Getting bigger is important. But it was really, just the market share, a big part of what they were looking at. And then it moved now to where we're similar to a utility. We are so accustomed to overnight delivery in America, whether it's us, UPS, Amazon, whatever. And when you get up in the morning, you expect the water to work, you turn on the lights, you turn on the internet, it's there. We expect our package to be delivered. So right now the service expectations are different today than when I first started. And the key thing is that if you're not willing to adapt to what is today, you're not going to be long in this business.
Yeah, and I think that's key in any industry, but in this one in particular, there's just so much change and so much kind of aggressive movement to be ready and flexible and adaptable with what the market demands, what clients demand, that if you can't change, then you will fail. And I think, it's a testament to you that the fact that the market has changed so much over the years and you've been able to keep up with it and still be successful. That's not easy to do at all.
Well, and I think it boils down to your outlook, because already today with these meetings that are going on, I've talked to other TSPs and I've talked to some vendors. The reality is we're going to be disrupted. AI, for example, is a big deal. You can be the disruptor or you can be the disruptee. Take your pick.
Yeah.
But to avoid it is not going to do you any good.
Yeah, you can't just close your eyes.
Right.
You can, but it's not going to work for long.
It's not going to work well.
Yeah. So when you're thinking about how your business grew, though, over the years, was there an inflection point where you realized you couldn't do everything on your own and you had to start building kind of back office and more support?
Yeah, there was. And I think I arrived at it in kind of call it a backdoor method, in that while I was driving, still have a lot of time to think and everything. It's like, well, if I could get up to whatever, and one of my first whatevers was 7 tractors, and we were doing a lot of trailer spot work along with line haul. 7 tractors, 12 drivers. That was going to be enough that I could not be in the truck all the time.
Okay. Yeah.
And so when we had all that going on, I was my own relief driver. Somebody's on vacation, calls in sick, I could jump in the truck. But it took, for me, that my numbers were, is I had to have that amount of, call it critical mass or whatever, to make it work. Well, then a lot of times we like to think that our growth is from, is linear this way. It's really kind of stair steps, because once I got to where I needed an admin person, well, I might as well have 14 trucks as 7 or 10 or whatever. And so incrementally we grew, and business was strong, and FedEx was taking more and more market share. But it was in 2000, I started the conversation in 2012, and in 2013 I acquired runs. Well, actually there was another fellow in St. Louis that was failing, and I was able to help him out, just give him some going away money. But other than that, I expanded in 2013 by purchasing a guy that was retiring in Ohio.
Okay. And then at that point, you finally got off the truck, or were you? Could you ever pull yourself away truly?
Yeah, in 2018.
Okay. Wow.
I let my physical expire.
Okay.
On purpose.
that is the official. I will get rid of this, and maybe I won't drive in a truck anymore.
It's like either even before that, the thing that I would remind everybody of, including my wife, is that I can drive one truck, one shift. So if you're scaling any kind of a business, you take a guy that starts a restaurant or whatever, he can do everything himself for one location. But whether you scale to 2 or to 22 or 2,200 of whatever it is that you're doing, you've got to put things together so that you can trust other people and you have systems. Systems and processes is what makes this work.
Yeah.
I was fortunate that in my career growing up with Dad, we were highly regulated by the Interstate Commerce Commission. So some of those practices and processes that they had in place then still make sense now.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where people just, as an entrepreneur, you just keep trying to do more, juggle more, and think that you'll just resolve everything. But yeah, at a certain point, there has to be process and technology that you build in, so that, because you can't juggle everything forever, you're going to drop something.
Well, and you mentioned entrepreneur. Do you know the definition of an entrepreneur? It's someone that's willing to work 80 hours a week for themselves so they don't have to work 40 hours a week for somebody else.
That's very true.
And I did a lot of 80-hour weeks when we were getting things going.
Yeah, it's a building process.
Right.
Yeah. So, what was the kind of size-wise the largest you ever got, location and number of runs?
Well, it's actually where we are now. I keep there's several friends of mine in the industry says that they've got wagers on in Las Vegas. Is Crawford's ever really going to retire? It ain't going to happen.
Yeah.
I say, well, I'm going to slow down. See, me slowing down would be to work 40 hours a week instead of 60. Well, and the thing really with all that, what's the size? I had sold my St. Louis operation, and we had dipped down, but then COVID came along, and there were some opportunities, and then a fellow that I knew was selling. I had great financing for it, so I bought and sold some things that I had in other areas, and then I'm pretty content. And then a fella 90 miles away is going to retire. And it's really hilarious because he's younger than I am. Yeah, he's a smart. You need to be talking to him. And so I just started I made an acquisition this past November. It's just 5 months ago.
Yeah.
And so that's put us up to, we're at 53 tractors now. So this is the largest that we've been. I probably have more trucks than I need. I need to start, paring back. We've got some older trucks that we could get rid of.
About time, right? Yeah. What do you think is the biggest mistake that new contractors make?
I would say for new contractors, their biggest mistake is not having enough time to really learn the uniqueness of their market. Even though we're one company, there's so many small intricacies. They have to learn and understand those and understand why they're different.
Perfect. And have you focused mainly on solos or teams or whatever happens?
Yeah, I had strictly solos.
Okay.
I did do a little bit of team things, and there was a time, and they still do some of this where they call roll, rest, roll. You could go out, your 10 hours, turn around, come back. When business was really strong, we did a fair amount of that. Okay. Right now, with business having dropped off post-COVID and all the economic unrest that we have right now, or I shouldn't call it unrest, but uncertainty.
Uncertainty, yeah, for sure.
So it just doesn't make sense to be in that. And some of the other vendors that are here that have the software tools and everything, you really have to not just know your numbers, but understand your numbers. You have this longer run, and so, hey, that brings this much money. But unless you have a truck that can have a separate auxiliary power unit, okay, you're letting that truck idle. And you have drivers that, hey, I'm willing to go out and just be gone 3 weeks at a time. That's great, but then they come home for a week. Well, if you take the mileage that you got for 3 weeks, average it over 4, you're the 3 weeks that you're making money, you're really making money, but then you're not the fourth week. So my average miles per week are better if I just focus on the out and back solos as opposed to trying these other. I think everybody will experiment with different things, and this is why you have to know and understand your numbers. At some point, you got to know that, hey, this isn't working, and you get out.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where you get lots of input. Just, FedEx will show you data, you'll get settlement statements, but the difference between data and intelligence is actually, knowing how to apply that data and do something with it. And I think there's a step that a lot of people miss of actually understanding their data and then knowing how to apply it for their business to actually make positive moves there.
Well, and I really enjoy the events like this where we're mingling with other contractors, because your labor ratio, for example, mine might be different than somebody else's, but it's just different. He has a different application, he or she. But if your labor rate for a guy that's running exclusive team, I shouldn't say labor rate, but your percentage of labor is going to be different with them as opposed to what mine is. If you take somebody that's in trailer spots, or primarily in trailer spots, their labor rate and their labor ratio, and so it's not like, well, hey, there's a one size fits all. There's industries out here. Take like you for a McDonald's franchise or Chick-fil-A or something like that. It's pretty common from the stores to expect this. We're unique enough that depending on what market you're in and where, like my expenses in Columbus, Ohio, are way different than they are in Rolla, Missouri. It's just.
And it because of that, like you said, it's so important to speak with other people in that area to know, am I crazy? Are these numbers right? Or are you seeing similar things? And actually collaborate as contractors at events like this.
Well, and for example, in Columbus, Ohio, we're looking at it real closely. It's our toughest market to recruit in. And it looks like, and we're hiring people, they're pretty good, but different companies, and not other FedEx contractors, just other companies are paying more. And we've done the analysis, it's fresh just this week, that if we raise our pay $2 an hour in Columbus, okay, some people will say, well, you can't afford to do that. If we eliminate what we're spending on recruiting, it's way more than the $2 an hour. So you might as well give the money to the employee as opposed to giving it to somebody else.
It's a mad company, right?
Now, does that mean I have to do that everywhere? No, but my profit margin, my gross margins are going to be less in Columbus. But I have a manager there that can manage the entire network of 4 communities. So this one's a little bit less, but if I didn't have it, I'm still paying the same manager the same salary to do less. So you have to go market by market, situation by situation. And it's, again, a solo that I do primarily at night versus, like if somebody comes to me and says, I'll start nights, but I want to go to a day job, don't start then, because I don't have day jobs. I can line you up with somebody that does, but I don't do that. Well, it took me a long time to figure out that, hey, I need to understand each market, but collectively, how do the nodes all work together?
Yeah. Yeah, and that is just the thing that's really hard to process always is that, especially for people who are expanding from their first terminal to their second, is that everything you know from Terminal 1 does not necessarily apply to Terminal 2. There can be all kinds of different contexts that change the way that terminal will work.
It's also even the personal side that you're dealing with a strictly a numbers cruncher manager over here, and this guy over here is maybe a little more, he's service minded. It's not that, he's got to meet his numbers goal and that, but there maybe one's more relational than the other. Again, they're different and they're manageable, but you just have to understand not everything is the same everywhere.
Yeah. So, you touched on it a little bit, talking about how you have to be adaptable and flexible, but, you've seen a wide change in terms of the FedEx market and contractors over the years. When you're looking at contractors today, what would you say is some of the things that you need to be successful as a line haul contractor today?
The top is, and the people that are doing well have done this, you have to let go of yesterday. What we were doing 5 years ago, what we were doing 10, 15 years ago has changed because so much in America has changed. And a great illustration that I'd like to give is that in 2018, I went to a trucking symposium. A really great guy there gave a presentation on recruiting, and the data that he had, again, 2018, he said 10 years before, so that'd be 2008, the average length of haul for over-the-road truckers was 750 miles. By the time you got to 2018, it was 480 miles. I don't have the exact data right now, but it's much shorter than that. And Amazon primarily is responsible for that. They have put warehouses, meaning product, closer to the consumer. And so instead of having an 800-mile run, you may have 2 400-mile runs or 200, 2 of 4 and 4 of 2 and whatever it is. So the growth of, it's not that all the long haul has gone away, but if you're going to get into the FedEx space, expect to do more of the shorter stuff, and that's one of the things, and that's consumer preference. When I was growing up, the Sears catalog was the internet,
weeks,
and you got it when you got it. And now, if you order something and it's not delivered that afternoon or the next morning, we just go crazy. And because the consumers have expected that, well, like it or not, we don't directly have to meet consumer expectation. But if the shippers that we're working with have to compete with Amazon, then we have to give the service that they need. And that's why you've probably heard a lot of things about going to 6-day delivery, 7-day delivery. A lot of people don't like it. Yes, I understand. But when we became a utility, then it's just, what if you only got fire department service 5 days a week, or electricity only work 5 days a week? Delivery services are considered a utility, and so there's that expectation that none of us had any control over, but if you don't do it, you're not going to be here.
Yeah, and it's always going to be about, what worked yesterday. Maybe it'll work today, but you can't hope and just expect it to work today. You always have to be open to those changes.
Well, I think we have to be open to the change too, in that the world that we live in, the culture that we live in today, employee expectations is different. This is probably 2018, 2019 or somewhere in there. I remember reading an article that said that the average 18-year-old at that time, by the time they're 40, will have had 11 jobs. When I was 18, if I told my dad I was going to have 11 jobs by the time I was 40, he'd just kick my butt. But the world has changed because you stayed closer to home. You stayed, you maybe moved from the farm to the town, which is 80 miles away. Now, because of the internet, I can go job hunting in San Diego or New York or whatever and not leave my house. And that's the reality of life.
And you can maybe stay in San Diego and work remotely for a company in New York.
Right. And so, if I was if you and I were collaborating on a project, you can send stuff to me overnight. We can do it on the internet, whatever it is. And so those changes, then employees, drivers will always be looking for more opportunities because they're inundated with information from the internet and whatever. And so you want to try to have your retention rate be as good as it can be. But when there's people like, I'm going to do this for a few years and I'm going to try a different career. Again, growing up in the 60s and 70s, that was never thought of because the opportunities weren't there. They're there today. And so if you take our overall driver, I guess you call it tenure, take all my drivers and when they started and whatever, we're at 1.9 years is the average.
That's great.
But I've got guys that have been here 10 years and I got people that have been here 10 weeks.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And, I think a lot of those are really good advice for contractors who can get ingrained in their ways, have been here for a while. On the flip side, what would you tell somebody who they're thinking about getting into line haul for the first time? What would you say, hey, this is something I wish I would have known, or that you should definitely know as you're coming in for the first time?
Well, one of the things is to learn and understand how the network works or operates. When I first started, it was probably 18 months before it kind of the light bulb went on. It's like, oh, that's how we do this. And FedEx, the network has always morphed and modified. UPS the same way. Again, to how do you have growing, improvement factors, whatever that might be. And like right now, we're going through this Express Integration 2.0, and that's going to add some things to line haul. This might be taken away over here, new things coming in. And so I would tell people that, well, first of all, if you're, depending on the location, see if you can talk to others that understand that market. There might be a great opportunity in Denver, but it's going to be different conditions than if it was in Albuquerque or Birmingham, Alabama, or whatever that might be.
Yeah.
And when you get to the more dense populated areas, you're going to have more opportunity. When I say more opportunity, there's more freight moving, but you have a lot more competition.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think that's all great advice. And, there's just so much to learn. There's only so much you can teach somebody. There's a lot that you just have to experience for yourself and learn it once you're already in the business.
Well, I agree, but a friend of mine, Mike Warman, back in the St. Louis area, this is probably 20 years ago, had told me that if you're going down the river in a canoe, it's nice to talk to somebody who knows where the stumps are.
Yes.
Well, I have hit all the stumps. So if people want to talk to me, that's fine, because I'll share what I know. It's not that I'm the only expert or anything like that, but, it's like sometimes you get focused on one thing. It's like, but look at this over here. A real hot button for me is providing benefits for the drivers. We do a better job sometimes of taking care of our trucks than we do our people. And that's just not right in my book. And so take care of your people. But, there's a lot of different ways to do that. But, if a truck wears out, you can go replace it, and you got a predictable, at 500,000 miles, going to replace the truck. But the driver that you have can drive the old truck, he can drive the new truck. So we need to be investing in our people as much as we're investing in our equipment.
Your goal is that you don't wear out your driver. You're finding ways to enhance their life, keep them sticky, and stay with you so that they can, be a renewable asset for you.
Well, and so as an employer, I cannot expect people to be like me of all of my work ethic. I mean, you want a good work ethic, but not everybody's going to be exactly like me. And they're going to have situations in their life where, maybe you have to modify something. It used to be like in employment back, again, 20, 30, 40 years ago, it was take it or leave it type thing. Now we have to be more, let's just say we got to be more flexible. That's probably the way to put it. And a story that I can tell you real quick from my time at Roberts Express, they had changed their model to where they had these customer assist teams in the home office. It was really working great, but we had a young lady working with us at the home office, really a good employee, but she just could not get to work on time. 8:30 was start time, and she just could not be there. And so the managers brought her in and say, hey, we need to talk about your stuff. And she just broke down in tears. I have a 2-year-old single mom. The dad had abandoned him, all that. The only daycare person that she trusted was across town. By the time she could get to work, she was always 5, 10 or so minutes late. So their response was, well, let's have you start at 8:45 instead of 8:30. They just made a minor change, saved a good employee, didn't have to train a new one because they were willing to make a minor shift. Now, we can't let the drivers dictate the company, but we just had it happen at one of our locations. We were able to hire, again, a single mom, but she could only work days, and we have a guy that's a divorced dad, and his kids are grown and everything. And he said, I'm willing to let her have my job, and I'll go to nights. I mean, where does that happen? It probably doesn't happen a lot, but we've got 2 happy employees instead of just one. So, sometimes you got to modify whether you like it or not.
Yeah. Sometimes it's playing matchmaker, sometimes it's just being a therapist, but at the end of the day, that's what it takes to be successful.
That's true.
So, beyond just, kind of continuing to grow this line haul business, where's your focus these days? Where do you spend your energy?
Well, when I'm outside of the business, I'm really passionate about people. the thing is that you be the best that you can be. That is kind of so wore out, but there's just a lot of steps that a lot of people are. They're trapped in a prison of fear. And back in 2021, a young fellow that worked for me, he wasn't a driver, he was a recruiter, and his performance was starting to slip, and I had to talk with him. And about a week or so later, he called me up and says, "Steve, I need to take time off. I'm an alcoholic. I got to go into rehab." Well, I started sharing with him that there is this prison of fear, and the bars are pride, fear, guilt, shame, all those type of things. And I had explained that to him, but the door is open, you can step out. And he said one of the most profound things. He says, "I know there's freedom on the other side of the door, but it's scary. And on this side of the door, it's dysfunctional, but it's what I know." So, my interest in this really started in 2011, but I really have become passionate that how can I help people get out of that prison of fear? And if you think of it like it's an actual setting, my job might be to take somebody by their hand, and freedom is on the other side of the street, and I walk them across the street. And then they're on their own. I can't live their life for them. But if I can help them understand that, hey, take that step to get out of that prison of fear. And I had an opportunity sharing with a young lady, this was a couple years ago, had the requirement from her boss, watch these presentations and everything, so someday you're going to have to be doing that. And she was, probably somewhere between 25 and 30 years old. And I could tell she was nervous, so I just started talking to her about this. And I asked her, "Do you like butterflies?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "You'll never see the beauty of a butterfly unless it comes out of its cocoon." And she just started to weep. But if you'd see her today, and it's not because of me, but she took that step out. And it's not that I'm responsible or that I accomplished her success for her, but really at the end of life, on my tombstone, if it says he helped me find my way, that's what God has me here for.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think a tribute both to you and probably to the culture that you create for your companies and your teams as well, in FedEx and everywhere. So. Well, Steve, it has been a pleasure to have you here and hear both what it takes, what it took 30 years ago when you were jumping in a truck for the first time and what you've built today. It's incredible to see that you're still building and that you're still growing. I think many people would be ready to rest on their laurels at this point, and I think it's a tribute to you, everything you've said here, that you're still trying to invest in your team, this community, and people in the way that you just talked about around conquering fear. So
I appreciate that. Yeah. And I love what I'm doing.
Yeah. Steve, if you could describe your leadership style in 3 words, what would it be?
My leadership style, 3 words, I would say, is engagement, direction, expectation.
Well, the last question I always ask people is, is there a favorite book, movie, or TV show? You can choose one that you're watching or reading right now.
I'm going to go with a book called Greatness.
Okay.
The author is David L. Cook, and you can only buy it online. It's really quite an expensive book.
Oh.
But it's a great read, and it talks about the things that I was saying before.
Yeah.
Not so much the overcoming fear, that is a part of it, but what are the things that it takes to be successful? And what the interesting thing is greatness on the cover is very small letters and not a capital G, because we become great by being less. And when you pour into other people, so he talks about, and you got to read the book on your own, but he talks about what's your focus, what is your passion, do you have the mental toughness, and those are the things that allows athletes, companies, whatever, when you focus on those things. And I'll be honest, I read that book. It's a very short book.
Yeah.
I probably read it a couple times a year because I have to stay directed. I'm easily distracted. And so it helps me with my focus because it's like, there's, I have to follow through on this. So that's my recommendation, people, greatness, and like I said, you have to go online to be able to get it. But if you just, David L. Cook, Greatness,
okay,
David L. Cook. Copy. Okay. I love it. It's a good
Perfect.
book.
All right, well, I'll go check it out.
All right.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks for being here, answering all our questions.
Appreciate
Walking us through it.
All right, thank you.
Yep.